So thank you for joining. If you're just arriving in the room, you get the fun part where I can tell you there's still seats in the front. So feel free. I promise I won't bite. Before we begin the actual presentation, so we're going to be talking about custom product pages, but I may or may not be contractually required to tell you about the company I represent, so please bear with me. I work for AppTweak. So if you haven't heard about AppTweak, it's an App Store optimization and App Store acquisition platform. We work with quite a few big names. We have won awards, so it's all nice and cozy. I'm going to tell you why I like AppTweak, because I wanted to do things a bit differently today. So as of today, there's 8 different products in AppTweak, and just this year we've released 99 new features. So my product team is doing a good job, usually. Not always, but usually. And if they don't, you can tell me and I tell them. It's really fun for me. The second thing is that AI is everywhere in 2023, and it's in AppTweak. But the thing I really like is that our AI is only based on our data, meaning only store data. So you won't have the problem of ChatGPT just inventing stuff about your app because it doesn't know it. The third thing that's kind of cool is that our customer success team is manned by people who actually do ASO. So even if we can't always solve your problem right away, at least we actually share the pain. And the last thing is a bit more personal, but as a French person, working in Belgium means I have colleagues who don't talk about politics and who just love beers, fries, and chocolate, and it's really cool for me. This is stuff about me. I won't read it because it feels a bit too ego maniac. But yeah, basically you can guess from the last slide that I'm becoming less and less of a sport enthusiast and more of a chocolate enthusiast. So here's what we're actually going to talk about today. I'm going to start with what I call introductory considerations, and it's just because when we talk about custom pages, you'll see why in a second. There's a lot of things to say, but there's also a lot of things to remember whenever we get started. And then we'll talk about what I call the framework, which is how you can get started and come up with many ideas at once and fast. How you can then, based on all the ideas you've generated, prioritize your efforts. When do you go into design and success measure success rather, and a couple conclusions at the end. So, without further ado, why did I lie? The presentation you saw online was called the Custom Product Pages Framework. I'm not going to say custom pages. Forget about the product, and the reason is because what I have to say applies to both CPPs on iOS, but also CSLs on Google Play. If you need a recap, here's kind of what they do each. I will assume most of you are familiar, so if at some point someone feels lost, just raise your hand and I'll try to address the problem. Why do we want to talk about custom pages? Well, basically, they've been the one thing that's really changed ASO in the past couple of years. And that's because we used to have one page for everyone, and now we can actually have multiple pages, and we can start actually talking to people as individuals, or at least as smaller groups, rather than just here's my app, you know me already, and try to just hack a few keywords or do slightly better creatives. We'll see that there's a special benefit for CPPs on iOS when you do ASA, because it's a great way to lower your cost per unit, and it actually also can improve organic sometimes, not always. But so that's a special case. But overall, the main reason to do custom pages is just because you want to engage with a particular segment of your audience, and you can improve your conversion for them by having a more specific message. But about that, here's what I now call the Jack Sparrow effect, just because I need some good memes in my presentation. When we talk about conversion in the App Store, we have to remember that people are rarely arriving on the App Store page without having heard of our apps first. So the challenge we have is that creative metadata, they have a good weight in what happens on the store, but it doesn't mean that's the end all of it. People know stuff about your app before they get there. And so whether it's how well did you target people so that they would land on your store page, whether it's when they actually see your store page, or whether it's because your product is positioned in a certain way, people arrive on your store page with certain assumptions. And what that means is that you can have the best custom page you want. If you're trying to sell sleeping pills to someone who's already asleep, you're going to struggle. So remember that whenever you're going to be building custom pages, you can aim to either reinforce what people think they know about you. You can aim to add to it, but you will have a very hard time trying to change their mind. Jack Sparrow had a very hard time changing the mind of Commodore Norrington over there because he was still a pirate. And even though he didn't have much for him, going for him, he still ended up in jail. So it's kind of the same with our apps. People know, they have heard of us at one point. So we have to take that into account when we try to convince them to download. Now, how can we come up with many ideas for custom pages? Little vocabulary moments, but I'm going to talk about segmentation by opposition to segment. Usually when we say, oh, I have a great idea of a custom page, what we think is, I have an idea for a particular segment of users because I can think of one way I relate to the app and I think I'm not the only person. And so that's probably one way that we could have a better message. That's your segment. The best way to actually come up with many ideas is to start with the kind of bottom-up approach, but also look at what does it mean? Well, if I started saying the way I'm looking at stuff is through a specific segment, what are all the other segments I could draw using the same logic? That's a segmentation. And so what we're going to do now is actually cover some of the most traditional segmentation methods that exist in marketing. First of all, demographics. I think that one is not a big surprise for anyone, but just wanted to remind you, this is always something you can do. It's usually easy when you work with social networks for ads because it's easy to target. Coming up with creative for them works better or worse in certain industries. But so it's usually an easy way to try and see if there's value there. We'll see that it's not usually the best one, but it can be an easy place to start. Another one is geography. And so here, usually in ASO, we say why, like we don't need custom pages because we have store pages. We have localization. And it's absolutely true. Like usually I tell people if your only idea is I want to have a different page in Germany and in the US, you probably don't need to have a custom page for that. So one caveat here though is remember that store pages are based on language. They're not based on country. And there are certain cases where you need to actually go a bit deeper as a result. For certain apps, you can even think maybe I want to have something at the city level. If I'm Uber Eats and I'm actually trying to show I can deliver food from all the best restaurants in Berlin, could feel like a good idea for an ad on Facebook. Well, in that case, maybe I want to have a custom page that shows specifically that on the store, but I need that page to only appear to people who are actually based in Berlin. Third one, my personal favorite is user behavior. We have a lot of great apps. I'm sure all of you have great apps. We have usually a lot of features in our apps or a lot of content. You can actually segment your user base by content preference or by feature preference to start seeing impacts. And so here, the good news is that usually you need to talk to your colleagues, but at the same time, product teams, they usually have those information already available. So the example I took here is Amazon Prime Video. They actually have American football. And that's something that I think you'll have a harder time selling here in Germany. But in the US, there's definitely an audience for it. It's also not the same audience as the people who are just looking for an alternative to Netflix and chill. And so here it's an easy point of attack to actually set up a different custom page. Now the big one, psychographics. Who has heard the word psychographics in this room before? One person. Awesome. So psychographics, it's usually trying to go inside the head of the user and say, why are they actually interested in my app? What is their personal motivator, or what is the personal value that they feel is relatable in my screenshots? For gaming, there's been a framework that's been around for several years, and I still consider it to be top-notch. It's the one from Game Refinery that you can see on the slide. It's basically trying to figure out what are the things that players appreciate in the gameplay of a game. For apps, I looked around and there wasn't one. So what you see here is something I tried coming up with. It's not particularly tested, so don't assume it's perfect. If anything, please test it and tell me what didn't work. But I felt like there are situations in which we can engage on what are the motivators for actually downloading an app. And there are big categories that I think are easy to relate. If I ask you, how many of you use Duolingo, Babbel, or any language learning app in the room? Couple people? Is it for learning and self-development? You would think so. My motivator is not that. I use it to learn Polish because my fiance is Polish and her parents don't speak English. And that means that my motivator is actually socializing. And so if I'm not the only person using a language learning app for this, it means there's a segment here who will find it interesting to have a motivation-based custom page because that will be relatable for them. What makes this so interesting in marketing usually is that we go from having a very rational conversation to a more emotional conversation. And people convert well when you engage with them emotionally. Last method is debatable, but it's what we call contextual segmentation. And here it's trying to go bottom up. It's instead of trying to figure out how do people differentiate themselves based on motivations, based on demographics, etc. Here it's just to say, I have different channels. Let me try and see, do I see different behaviors by the different actions I'm actually doing? And so here you could start with just looking at, are people coming from different UA channels engaging with different types of ads? Another type, though, is also looking into seasonal events, and these can be more or less organic or artificial. Seasonality in the sense of people don't want the same stuff from a travel app in the summer and in the winter. That's seasonality you didn't really invent. But something like Singles Day, I don't know if you heard of it. I heard about it this year for the first time. I had no idea what it was. So there's also ways that you can create seasonality with your user base by how your product team is building certain engagement loops. One thing I like to say is, if you're starting this bottom-up approach, look at what data is available to you. Product data, I mentioned, is probably available internally in all companies. Most of you are probably doing ASO at some point of your job. And in here, I tend to say there is value in ASO data that's not just about knowing which keyword to target or how to change your creative. So 3 data points I would advise looking at when trying to figure out what are different user segments would be the keyword clusters. When you look at one keyword, look at the long tail that comes with it. Does that mean that this keyword diverges into different directions? App clusters, looking around your competitors, do they have particular selling points? And user reviews. So for user reviews, I have a case study from something I did with SoundCloud a while ago now already, but we had this thing where the question we had was, we just wanted to try and figure out a way to get better performance from search ad. But we said, we want to try and see, are there any interesting segments? Let's see what people tell us in the user reviews and see if we can make something interesting out of it. And we saw that people were telling SoundCloud, yeah, I really like it because you can skip as much as you want. And that took a little thinking time, but we realized actually what that meant is, if you use Spotify, if you use any music streaming service, you actually have a limited amount of skips if you're not a subscriber. So these were people looking for music for free, and they were annoyed by the fact that they couldn't get to the music they wanted, and SoundCloud actually offered that. So we decided, let's show them we have this benefit, and let's run this CPP on competitors' campaigns in ASA. Results are on the screen, so you can see what's pretty good. Not to say there's no improvements that could or have been made since, but it's a good demonstration of sometimes user reviews also tell you how your users behave. Now, these are all ideas of where to find your IDs and how to find multiple IDs that you're going to have to then decide how to prioritize. So my point is to say, start with the user behaviors. Why? Because if we look at what's easily done, well, user behavior segmentation, usually we can just ask the product team, do you have anything for me? And hopefully they don't hate us, and we can actually get a reply within a week that starts giving us a nice picture. On the other end, if we look at other segmentation methods, demographics isn't always working, especially for digital products. Hannah Pervaz, who's hosting downstairs, did this amazing comparison a couple of weeks ago, where basically Ozzy Osbourne and King Charles are having the exact same demographics, but you would probably not market things the same way to both of them. So demographics is easy. If you don't have better from user behaviors, sure, default back to it, but start with user behaviors. Psychographics, they're awesome, but the thing is, they take more time to generate. They're less certain to deliver a first uplift, so it's probably not where you start, it's where you expand. Contextual segmentation, the challenge is that you will never know exactly if the differences in behavior you see from different UA channels is actually because of the message, or if it's because of the UA channel, because of the targeting, because of other factors. So again, it's something to explore, but not the starting point, in my opinion. Second thing, traffic size matters. In here, once you start having an idea of these are custom product pages that are worth actually designing, which one do you do first? Well, start with the question of how many people will be interested. So if we look at CPPs done for Apple Search Ads, one example here is to show Babbel is having these neat CPPs that target particular languages. And what's interesting is that if you look just at the keyword count, you could think that it's better to start with Italian because there's more keywords that you can target with Italian. But in reality, when you start looking into the maximum reach that you get from these keywords, German is a higher value. So investigate all the time how much traffic can you get from this particular segment. One important thing, if a segment is more than 50% of your user base, it's too important to be done with a CPP. The only reason to do it with a CPP is if it's so far away from everyone else that you'll have more losses than wins. But usually if it's over 50% of your user base, this is where you want to change your default creatives, not build a CPP. Once you know the size of traffic, you should also consider how much improvement do you think can be achieved there. So here I have something for those of you who use Apple Search Ads. One thing I found is that in Apple Search Ads, if you compile the ASA impression share report you can get from Apple, do a bit of pivot table, etc., you get this report where you can actually map for each search term how many impressions, how many taps, how many downloads, etc. I tend to say that if you have taps but no downloads, it probably means people are curious about your app, but you are not telling them the right thing. So that's usually where I start thinking, this is where I want to have a CPP. And so what I've done is I just used a bit of conditional formatting on Excel to have the information of what are keywords, what are search terms, for which I actually have less than 50% conversion from tap to install. I also added a quick mention of I want in here in the example it's at least 20 taps for the period of time I'm studying, because I want to make sure I'm not investing time on things where there's just not enough taps at all. And that's going to show me which are the least converting pages at the moment, or the least converting ads, where I have curiosity but no conversion. So with that, the goal is to usually highlight where is the best improvement and where it's likely going to be easier. It's not always true, because we still have to consider what people were looking for in the first place. But if I tell you one campaign is converting 50%, the other is converting 10%, pretty sure most of you would say, let's start trying to improve the 10% one, because it feels like there's probably an easier way to improve that. The one consideration here is also remembering the user context. Yes, I had promised great memes, so I'm doing my best here. Big thing, this is very Apple search ads on this one, to be honest, but when you use a CPP, you have to think about how many people may see it. You have to think about how to have, like, where you can actually improve, but you also have to think about, is this improvement in line with the moment the user is going to see it? And so I want to share this example from NordVPN, because I just found it very interesting. A few months ago, I found out that when people search for Norton, they can see this ad from NordVPN that just tells them first, looks like you're trying to spell NordVPN wrong. And I found that to be very smart. I don't know if they had great results on it, but I found the approach to be smart, because they figured out that if you slap a CPP on a competitor's name, saying how great you are, you haven't necessarily stopped the person to say, hey, hi, I'm here. You just said, I'm great. But if they're really going to be laser focused on, I just go to the first organic result, you've actually missed your opportunity. And so remember, when you build your pages, that there also has to be a fit with the user context. Because if you first grab their attention, then you can say what you have to say. But make sure to have their attention first. At that point, that should start saying, okay, you can do many segmentations. You can start thinking, which one do I do first? We still want to do a lot. And so what we would love to get is, if we go back to the idea of the audience is a pizza. I really like pizza. But if the audience is a pizza, I have these different methods for cutting my pizza, for segmenting. And ideally, I would want to have 0 segment be shared between 2 segmentations. That is not likely to happen. You'll probably have something like that instead. So in here, it just expects it to happen. It's part of the game. Just be smart about it. So if you can already pinpoint to these 2 segments are likely going to overlap, don't bother doing, like, targeting both at the same time. Take one targeting, try the CPP based on your segmentation, and then build the other CPP and measure how that is, is that better or worse? Because in the end, you probably will have most of the conversion increase you can get from one of the 2. Combining more is going to be challenging. For the ASO people in the room, please make sure CPPs are under your purview. Same with CSLs. Why? Can anyone tell me what the problem with these screenshots is? No, text is good, actually. But you're on the right path. I think we could all say that for an app called text-free call plus texting line, a USP like unlimited texting and calling is kind of important. This is what people see when they land. So if you think, okay, but they heard about the app already, it's like they know the USP already, it's probably not the biggest mistake in the world. But still, this is a kind of attention to detail that's necessary and that usually comes from the ASO people, because we know that whatever assets are designed, if they're designed by an amazing designer with a 4K screen, there's going to be a lot of details that will never be seen by anyone on the store. And so in here, this is my 5 minutes rant on CPPs, CSLs should be done by the ASO people, or at least should be reviewed by the ASO people, because we are the people who can remind anyone in the company there is a context when you get to the store, and there is a particular UI. Same if we look at the differences between iOS and Google Play. Having the same screenshots on iOS and Google Play has been a debate for years. Basically, users probably come to your store page for the same reasons, whether they're on iOS or Android. The one thing, though, is that the UI on the store is not the same. And so what may look like readable content on the App Store becomes much tinier on the Play Store. And so that's where you may want to have different designs. Rant over. Now let's talk about measurement. First of all, CPPs are here to help you achieve a goal, so make sure you know what the goal is, you know that the goal can be measured with a particular KPI, and that that KPI is measurable in the context of a CPP. Second, compare apples to apples. On the Apple console, you can actually view the conversion rate per product page. Sounds like a good idea. The problem is, your default product page is seen by everyone, meaning the users who land on your store page with very high download intent, as well as the ones who land with very low download intent. With most CPPs, unless you do a CPP for your brand, you're probably going to have people who have a lower download intent by default. That means that your conversion rate for the CPP is likely never going to be better than the default, or at least it will be hard to get there. So what you should do instead, when you can, and that's CSLs by country on Google Play, do an A/B test. An A/B test will let you know, do I see an improvement from changing the creatives? On the App Store, you can't do an A/B test on your custom pages. So what you need to do is just create the custom page, but don't change the creatives at first. Let it run for at least 1 or 2 weeks, just to get data, measure the KPI you want to measure. When you still have the default page, for users, it's 2 weeks of the same thing. And after 2 weeks, you change it and you start trying to make projections for, is there an improvement? If you get a win, don't stop there. If you have a nice win because your segmentation actually works well, your first segment is delivering a good uplift. Look at what are all the adjacent segments and look at scalable design. We see it here from Nerd AI. We had seen it before from Babel. Basically, if your segmentation is content-based, you don't necessarily need to change a lot of your screenshots. You may just need to change a little text, swap the order, etc. Also, if the CPP is doing really well, try using the same creatives on your default. Sometimes it's just the creative is so much better than people will like it even if they're not the intended target. So wins are great, but they have to be scaled with CPPs. Conclusion, this is kind of the framework to try and have a neat overview. Again, I see a lot of phones, that's very nice people, but ask for the slide, it will be easier for you guys to read it. But yeah, it's basically a framework we would already have had for default creatives. The main difference now is just that we should be spending more time thinking about segmentation than thinking about users, and the design comes from that. It's not so much about what are all the design changes we can make, it's who are all the people we can talk to. There are a couple special cases I want to mention as a departing thought, because we have a couple of things that you can do with CSLs, especially, that don't relate to the question of can we improve conversion, but just are best practices for ASO. If you know this meme, you know where I'm going with it, but basically, if you don't have a CSL by country on your Play Store, there's something you're missing, and it's that when you do a local experiment on your default language, it's actually being seen by everyone. At least it's seen in many countries. So don't do that. Whatever your default language is, create a CSL for the country of that default language. That way, if you want to improve conversion in the US and you do an A/B test, you don't get results coming in from Taiwan. You actually only get results coming in from the US. The other thing that is to be tested is when you're trying to measure web to app funnels. You can sometimes do it with an MMP. The problem is it's not automatic, so you'll have to spend time on it. And even if you do it with an MMP, the one thing you won't know is what happened at the store level. Did people leave when they saw my store page, or did they just download but never open the app, etc.? This is this portal that you get. So what you can do instead is set up a CPP. It doesn't have to have any different creative. You can just duplicate your default page, but just to have one place in the store console where you can measure how many people landed on the page and how many people actually downloaded the app. That will be it for today. This presentation was based on a guide I wrote recently, so if you want to download it, didn't get it at the beginning, the QR code is here again. And otherwise, I don't know if we have time for questions, so if some people want to talk, I'm happy to hear you guys, and otherwise, I'll see you around. Any questions around the room? Yes, one.
Just stay for the mic. Hi, thank you. Can you tell more about this measuring web to app? Like, what exactly you mean? Like, why do we need specifically to use custom product page for this one?
So you don't necessarily need to use custom pages for it, but usually it's an easy way to do it if you don't have any solution, because the setup is really quick. Problem you have is that on Google Play, you can maybe rely on UTM links sending to your store page, but anyone who has used a Google console in the past 6 months must have gotten very frustrated. So if instead you just say, I create a custom page, I just create a URL, basically. I don't change anything. I just need to create the URL in the Google console. And then I can go to the Google console and see how many store listing visitors did I get from that specific store URL, how many downloads did I get. It gives you numbers quickly. Any other questions?
Hi. Can you please elaborate on creating the custom product pages based on psychographics? Like, do we make custom product pages like for different audiences based on psychographics for like the same keywords in ASA, for example?
So that's the tough part. The tough part with psychographics is that it's probably the best way to get people to react, but it's not the easiest to target. Usually you'll have to think about, if someone searches for a particular keyword, does that keyword indicate a particular motivation? To give an example, if I look for a hotel booking app, it's tough to say why I want to book a hotel. Most of the time, we will assume that people want to go on holidays, but we're all here on business, and if you're not from Berlin, you probably had to get a hotel. If someone is looking for business accommodation, then you kind of have that particular intent. Here, we're not yet on the situation of specifically the psychographics. We're more at the user context or at the behavior level, but it's kind of the challenge. If we use them in ASA, we have to make an assumption of there is a particular mindset, there is a particular motivation for searching that particular search term. What would work really well when you do psychographics-based CPPs, CSLs, is leveraging the ad networks that rely a lot on your creative performance. So it's more of thinking, if you can already map a couple of motivators for your users, you can work with the UA team to actually craft both a CPP and an ad creative. Just craft them and have the ad creators running to see which one performs best and tells you about the particular motivation of players, of users. And from there on, each creative that reflects on a particular motivator has its own CPP. And you can then also see which is the biggest motivator and start trying to test it on other campaigns, ASA, for instance. You can try it as your default, etc. But that's also why I'm saying psychographics are probably the most exciting thing to do, because it kind of gets you in the head of the user, and it's usually more interesting than just looking at numbers on Excel. But it's also a longer process, so that's why I'm usually saying don't start there. Build on the basics and then go into that domain.
Hello. So, from your experience, what do you think, does it worse to run custom product pages on search ads showcasing the discount offer during holiday season? Like how it will impact the conversion rate? Is there any risks that it will decrease the conversion rate? Because I heard about that too.
Should we show discounts? First of all, we have to discuss if Apple will let you. If you are familiar with the review process, you know that on paper, no one should be allowed to. In practice, Shein has been doing it for years. And even if you are a smaller app, there's a good chance you will be let off the hook anyway. Now, what does that do for your conversion? I think the question is, how do you measure your conversion? Because if you're showing me a discount, the thing I want to look at is how many people got the discount. It doesn't matter to me, do I get more downloads or not? It's, do I get more purchases? In the end, it's all about going back to what is the goal of the CPP, what should it achieve? And so showing a discount has better or worse effect depending on the user context. What we saw on Black Friday is that everyone shows discounts there. If you read certain marketing newsletter, you'll have people tell you that means that on that day, if you show a discount, you're actually going to become less visible because everyone is going to be doing the same, so you're not standing out. On the other end, if you need to show a discount to people coming from ad campaigns because they have to download your app first, you may need to show the discount just so that they feel safe and they don't feel like they clicked on a fake ad and now they're about to download an app where they won't get what they're looking for. So it all depends on the user context, basically.
Do you have any favorite CPP examples in mind, like something that you found impressive?
Yes, I do. Some of them were in the presentation, so I'm happy to share the slides. With that being said, I'm one person. I'm biased. Something I forgot to mention about the psychographics-based CPPs. Usually we like a lot those that relate to us, but that means we can end up having confirmation bias. With the example I shared about language learning, I'll be thrilled to say, let's just try the speak to your in-laws CPP. I don't know if that's going to work because I don't know how many people actually are like me. I really want to try it, but should I prioritize it? Is that a good CPP? Numbers will say, not me. All right, then I guess we'll end it up here, but thank you all for coming and see you around the event.